The long peace. For 10,000 years, the galaxy had known peace so complete that most species believed it was permanent. The Galactic Concord had been formed in the ashes of ancient wars. Conflicts so old they were remembered only through fragmented records and ceremonial memorials. Entire civilizations had once burned, stars had gone dark, and species had vanished. Those lessons had been enough. War was declared obsolete, an evolutionary failure corrected by diplomacy, trade, and shared prosperity. Humanity arrived late to this enlightened age. When humans first emerged into interstellar space, the Concord watched them carefully. Their history was unsettling. A species that had reached the stars while still arguing with itself, still divided by borders, still capable of annihilating its own cities. Many expected humanity to become a problem. Instead, humans surprised everyone. They dismantled their war fleets. Their battleships were stripped and turned into hospitals, universities, and museums. Their admirals became engineers. Their generals became historians. Humanity spoke often of peace, more often than any other species, and invested staggering resources into infrastructure, logistics, and deep space construction. In time, the galaxy relaxed. Human space became synonymous with safety. Trade routes passing through human territory experienced fewer pirate attacks than anywhere else in the Concord. Human diplomats were polite, patient, and almost irritatingly calm. When disputes arose, humans mediated instead of threatened. When provoked, they de-escalated. Some species admired them. Others pitied them. The younger civilizations whispered that humanity had grown soft, that 10,000 years without war had turned them fragile. Their military doctrines, preserved in archives and simulations, were considered academic exercises, interesting but irrelevant. The galaxy had moved on. The Cracks' dominion did not believe in moving on. The Cracks were new to the Concord, powerful, unified, and ambitious. Their rise had been rapid, fueled by conquest before their forced admission into galactic society. Officially, they respected Concord law. Unofficially, they resented it. To the Cracks, peace was stagnation. Their analysts studied human space with keen interest. Vast resource systems, sparse defenses, no standing fleets along the frontier, only automated traffic control stations and research platforms. It looked less like a border and more like an invitation. Humans fear war. The Cracks War Council concluded. They have forgotten how to fight. Permission was granted. The first strike came without warning. A human research station orbiting a dead star vanished in a silent bloom of plasma. No distress call. No survivors. By the time the Concord received the transmission, the Cracks fleet was already gone. Panic spread faster than outrage. Emergency sessions were called. Delegates shouted, pleaded, demanded restraint. The Cracks ambassador justified the attack as a territorial correction. Some Concord members urged sanctions. Others, quieter but more numerous, turned their attention to humanity. They expected rage. They expected fear. They expected humanity to beg for intervention. Instead, the human delegation requested time. The footage of the destroyed station was transmitted to Earth, Mars, Luna, and 1,000 orbital habitats. Analysts confirmed the casualties. Names were read. Lives counted. The loss was real, undeniable, and deeply human. Then something strange happened. Across human command centers, a single protocol activated, one that had not been used in recorded history. Secure channels opened. Encrypted archives unlocked. Facilities long labeled as inactive changed status. Not to red, to green. In the Concord chamber, the human ambassador stood calmly while the galaxy argued around her. When finally granted the floor, she bowed her head respectfully. "We acknowledge the incident," she said, "and we thank the Concord for its concern." Her tone was measured, controlled, almost gentle. A representative from a neighboring species leaned forward. "Will humanity request defensive assistance?" "No," the ambassador replied. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Another delegate asked carefully, "Will humanity retaliate?" The ambassador paused, just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. Not immediately, she said. The Crack's ambassador laughed openly. Then this matter is settled. The human ambassador turned her gaze toward him. For the first time, her expression changed. She smiled. It was not wide, not cruel, not angry. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed a long-standing suspicion. After 10,000 years of peace, she said softly, someone has finally decided to test us. The Concord chamber fell quiet. We will respond, she continued, in a way that is proportional, controlled, and final. What does that mean? The Cracks demanded. The human smile lingered. It means, she said, that you are about to learn why we worked so hard to keep the peace. Far from the chamber, beneath layers of rock, ice, and vacuum, systems awakened. Shipyards that had never officially existed powered on. Vessels designed not for intimidation, but for inevitability began assembling themselves with flawless precision. Humanity had not forgotten war. They had simply spent 10,000 years making sure they would never need to fight it twice. And that was why, when the galaxy chose violence, humanity just grinned. The smile that terrified the stars. The galaxy expected chaos. After the Crack strike, the Concord braced for frantic mobilization, desperate pleas for allies, and the slow, grinding buildup that preceded every ancient war recorded in galactic history. Observers waited for humanity to shout, to posture, to threaten. None of that happened. Human space went quiet. Trade lanes remained open. Civilian traffic continued on schedule. No emergency broadcasts echoed across the stars. To the Concord's analysts, it looked like paralysis or denial. The Cracks took this silence as confirmation. Within days, their fleets moved again, this time openly. Hundreds of warships crossed into human frontier systems, banners blazing, weapons charged. Their intent was not annihilation, but demonstration. A swift, overwhelming show of force would shatter human resolve and force capitulation. Instead, they found nothing. No fleets rushed to meet them. No minefields flared to life. The systems appeared empty, abandoned even. Crack's commanders advanced deeper, confidence rising with every unchallenged jump. Then human space spoke. Across every Crack's vessel, sensors flared with impossible readings. Mass shadows appeared where there had been none seconds before. Gravity distorted. Navigation systems screamed errors. Human ships emerged, not from jump points, but from space itself. They unfolded. What the Cracks had cataloged as cargo haulers and habitat constructors shed their civilian profiles. Hull plates rotated, revealing armored cores. Structural trusses reconfigured into weapon spines. Engines designed for hauling continents redirected their output into focused gravitational vectors. These were not warships as the galaxy understood them. They were tools repurposed with terrifying efficiency. The first human strike did not target a ship. It targeted coordination. A single pulse rippled through the Crack's formation. Not electromagnetic, not kinetic, something else entirely. Command relays failed. Tactical AIs froze mid-calculation. Fleets that had trained to move as one suddenly became hundreds of isolated vessels. Human ships advanced in silence. They did not broadcast threats. They did not demand surrender. They moved with calm precision, carving through formations with minimal fire, disabling engines, crippling weapons, leaving drifting hulks in their wake. Crack's commanders shouted orders that went unheard. Within minutes, a force meant to intimidate an entire civilization was broken. The Concord watched in horror. For the first time in 10,000 years, war was not theoretical. It was happening, and it was happening fast. Observers scrambled to record what they were seeing, struggling to classify human technology that had never appeared in any registry. One historian whispered the unthinkable. They didn't disarm, she said. They adapted. As the Crack's fleet fell back in disarray, humanity finally transmitted a message. It was brief, unencrypted, addressed not just to the Cracks, but to the entire Concord. We are invoking contingency, Doctrine 1. No one outside humanity knew what that meant. Inside human space, ancient words echoed through command centers, phrases drilled into memory over millennia, passed down as tradition rather than necessity. Officers who had never expected to hear them spoken now repeated them without hesitation. Escalation control authorized. Civilian preservation mandatory. Conflict termination prioritized. This was not a species relearning war. This was a species resuming a posture it had mastered long ago. The Cracks War Council reeled as reports flooded in. Ships lost without warning. Fleets scattered. No decisive battle to rally around. No glorious clash to inspire morale. Worse, human tactics changed with every encounter. When the Cracks adjusted formations, humans countered before the change completed. When new weapons were deployed, defenses were already waiting. It was as if humanity had already fought this war. The truth was more disturbing. They had fought versions of it thousands of times, against themselves. In the Concord chamber, fear replaced outrage. Delegates who had once urged restraint now begged humanity to slow down, to negotiate, to stop. The human ambassador listened patiently. "We are," she said. "By what measure?" A delegate demanded. "By ours." The Cracks ambassador no longer laughed. His mandibles trembled as he spoke. "You hid this. You let us believe you were weak." The human ambassador tilted her head slightly. "No," she replied. "We let you believe violence was unnecessary." She leaned forward, her smile gone now, replaced by something colder, older. "You chose war," she said. "We chose to remember why we stopped fighting it." Across the frontier, human ships held position, surrounding the shattered remains of the Cracks' advance. Weapons remained powered, but silent. The message was unmistakable. This was only the beginning. And for the first time since the Concord's founding, the galaxy understood the truth behind humanity's smile. It was not confidence. It was certainty, a species that learned too well. The war did not spread. That alone unsettled the galaxy. Every historical conflict the Concord had studied followed the same pattern: retaliation, escalation, collateral devastation. Borders collapsed, allies were dragged in, and entire regions burned. But the human response obeyed none of those rules. The fighting stayed contained, precise, and relentlessly one-sided. Human fleets did not push deeper into Cracks territory. Instead, they severed it. Supply convoys vanished without explosions. Communications arrays went dark simultaneously across multiple systems. Jump gates remained intact, but useless, their control protocols rewritten by an intelligence no Cracks engineer could decipher. The Dominion was being disassembled without its people ever seeing a human ship. Cracks commanders attempted adaptation. New fleet doctrines were issued. Decentralized command structures replaced shattered hierarchies. For a brief moment, resistance stabilized. Then humanity changed tactics again. Human vessels began targeting time, not chronologically, but logistically. Fuel depots were disabled hours before fleets arrived. Repair yards were neutralized moments after construction began. Reinforcement fleets emerged from hyperspace only to find their destinations already silent, their objectives rendered irrelevant. The Concord's analysts stared at the data in growing dread. This was not brute force. It was predictive warfare. Human command AIs, long rumored, never confirmed, did not simply react. They modeled. Every Cracks decision fed the next calculation. Probability trees collapsed into inevitabilities. The Cracks were not losing battles. They were being outpaced by a species that had practiced losing and surviving long enough to learn how to never lose again. On the Cracks' homeworld, panic seeped into the public consciousness. There were no dramatic images of planetary bombardment, only absence. Empty trade lanes, silent outposts, fleets that departed and never returned. Rumors spread faster than official statements. The Dominion's leaders insisted victory was imminent. Their words rang hollow. Humanity, meanwhile, spoke rarely. When they did, their messages were directed not at governments, but at populations. Human transmissions appeared across Cracks' civilian networks, carefully translated, impossible to block. "We are not your enemy," they said. We will not destroy your worlds. This ends when your leaders stop. It was a message no Concord War doctrine had ever permitted, and one the cracks had never prepared to counter. The breaking point came with the capture of War Executor Karish, architect of the initial assault. His flagship was disabled mid-jump, its drives frozen in a gravitational lock so precise that no structural damage occurred. Human Marines boarded without resistance. Karish expected torture, execution, some theatrical display of dominance. Instead, he was brought into a quiet room, seated across from a human strategist whose uniform bore no rank insignia. You could have warned us, Karish spat. You could have shown your strength. The human regarded him calmly. We did, she said. For 10,000 years. She activated a projection, human history, compressed and curated. Cities burning, skies darkened by ash, entire populations erased by decisions made too late or in anger. We nearly destroyed ourselves, she continued. Over and over. Every way a species can fail, we did. Karish recoiled. Then why survive? So we could learn, the human replied. So no one else would have to. The strategist leaned forward. You think this war is about territory, she said. It isn't. It's about whether your civilization can stop before it becomes what we once were. Outside the room, the war was already ending. Without supply lines, without coordination, without faith in their leaders, Crack's fleets stood down. Systems declared neutrality. Governors refused orders that would invite further human intervention. The Dominion fractured. When the final ceasefire was announced, there was no climactic battle, no burning capital, no victory parade, only silence. Humanity presented terms to the Concord and the Crack's remnant leadership. Immediate disarmament of offensive fleets, integration into Concord oversight, human-led reconstruction of disrupted infrastructure, cultural exchange focused on conflict prevention. They did not demand tribute. They did not claim territory. They demanded accountability. The Concord accepted in stunned unanimity. As human fleets withdrew to holding positions, Concord delegates began to understand the full horror of what they had witnessed. Humanity had fought a war without hatred, without vengeance, without losing control. A Concord philosopher summarized it best. Other species learn peace by forgetting war. Humans learn peace by remembering it perfectly. The galaxy had survived the conflict, but its innocence had not, because everyone now knew the truth. Humanity was not dangerous because it loved war. Humanity was dangerous because it had mastered it and chosen, every day since, not to use it, until someone forced them to remember. The meaning of the grin. The war ended the way it had been fought, quietly. No worlds burned. No stars were shattered. When the ceasefire came, it arrived not with celebration, but with paperwork, reconstruction schedules, and the steady hum of ships repairing what had been broken. To the galaxy, it felt unfinished, as though something catastrophic had been narrowly avoided rather than concluded. Humanity returned to work. Human engineers reopened trade corridors weeks ahead of schedule. Supply chains were restored with almost unsettling efficiency. Crack systems that had gone dark found themselves brighter than before, rebuilt with redundancies they had never possessed. Human medical ships treated civilians without distinction, their crews refusing payment. The fleets that had terrified the stars did not linger. One by one, human vessels powered down their weapons and altered course. Some disassembled themselves in orbit, returning components to storage. Others vanished into deep space, slipping back into locations the Concord would never officially map. War for humanity was not a state of being. It was a contingency, now closed. In the Concord chamber, historians struggled to rewrite doctrine that had stood for 10,000 years. War was no longer an abstract failure of the past. It was a tool, dangerous, precise, and terrifyingly effective, in the hands of a species that understood its cost too well to wield it carelessly. A Concord scholar requested an interview. She was granted access to a human strategist, one of the architects of the response. The meeting took place in a modest room overlooking Earth's Terminator line, the planet half-lit, half-shadowed. Everyone keeps asking the same question, the scholar said. Why did your ambassador smile when war was declared? The human considered this. Because the outcome was no longer uncertain, she replied. That sounds arrogant. The human shook her head. No, it was relief. She gestured toward Earth below. For 10,000 years, we worked to ensure we would never need to do this again. We built systems, doctrines, safeguards. We argued endlessly about ethics, proportionality, and restraint. Her voice softened. We smiled because if war had come, and we had failed, then all that work would have been meaningless. The scholar hesitated. And if the cracks had won? They wouldn't have, the humans said simply. But if they had, it would have meant we were wrong about ourselves. That would have been worse. Across the galaxy, the cracks' dominion no longer existed as a unified power. Its people remained, protected and rebuilding, but its ideology had collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. Schools replaced war academies. Monuments commemorated not conquest, but the day their civilization had been spared annihilation. Some cracks called it humiliation. Others called it survival. In private communications, Concord leaders debated what humanity truly was. Protector? Guardian? A silent threat keeping the galaxy in line? Humanity rejected all such titles. When asked to assume a permanent military role, they declined. When offered leadership of the Concord, they refused. They dismantled their emergency fleets and sealed their contingency archives once more. A junior Concord delegate finally asked the question no one else dared voice. What happens if another species chooses war? The human ambassador's answer was unchanged. Then we will smile again. Not because humanity desired conflict, but because they had already done the hardest part, learning how not to lose themselves to it. In time, the galaxy adjusted. New doctrines were written. Aggression became less fashionable. The memory of the war faded into cautionary history rather than legend. Yet one lesson endured. Peace was not the absence of violence. It was the presence of restraint, backed by the ability to act when restraint failed. Humanity had earned its peace the hard way, through failure, loss, and an understanding of war so complete that it no longer tempted them. And so, after 10,000 years of peace, when aliens chose war, the galaxy finally understood why humanity had smiled. Because the outcome was never in doubt. Because humanity had already survived the worst war imaginable. The one against themselves. And they had won.